So thank you for all being here. I want to start with just a basic practice. As Tracy mentioned, right now I'm in another graduate program in applied breathing behavior science. And I could very easily get lost in the weeds talking about this program because it is just absolutely mind-blowing. But the short of it, just to share the research of what we're about to do, is a part of the program, we have to buy this, I'm not kidding, and I'm ashamed to say, $5,000 breathing machine that comes with software, and it hooks up to a cannula that you would use like for oxygen, if any of you have ever been on oxygen or used oxygen. What the machine does, you put it over and you breathe, and in real time, it shows you the behavior, the waveforms of your breath in real time in relation to your respiratory chemistry. And the point of this is you get to see that breathing and respiration, though interconnected, are different, which means that we can learn to breathe in ways that are a disservice to our respiratory chemistry and consequently, additionally, to our ability to emotionally regulate. That when we learn to breathe in ways that crash and dysregulate our respiratory chemistry, we become emotionally dysregulated. And so when using this machine with individuals, they can build self-awareness of all these micro breathing behaviors that are disrupting their ability to self-regulate. It's an absolutely fascinating process. But since you all don't have machines, we're going to do the experiential kind of component of this where we can start to pay attention to maybe we're adding unnecessary effort and tension. That's really the real experiential subjective cue, is when we're adding unnecessary tension and effort to our breathing. So that's what this exercise is going to do. It's very basic. So if it's possible to sit up, please do so. If it's not and you're lying down, feel free just to get comfortable. If you want, you can put a hand on your chest and a hand on your belly. And the point of this is it can often be very difficult to feel your breathing from the inside out. So when you put a hand on your chest and a hand on your belly, you're able to feel your breathing also from the outside in. So it adds sensory cueing to your awareness. And so if you have a hand there and a hand there, that's fine. I invite you to close your mouth and breathe through your nose. And then last, if you're comfortable doing so, you can close your eyes. And all this does is reduce the amount of information that you're taking in. If you are more comfortable keeping your eyes open, you can just drop your gaze down at about a 45-degree angle. And now I just want you to take a moment and on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being super high alertness and arousal, 1 being you could fall asleep in moments, 5 being you're at that perfect balance between alertness and calm. I want you to feel your body and feel your breathing and just simply give yourself a score for where you show up on that continuum right now. And you don't need to share the score, just make a note of it in your own mind. So I'll give you 15 seconds, 20 seconds here to do that. Okay, let's take that score and just put it aside. And now I want you just first and foremost to notice your body as a whole. And just simply acknowledge the fact that you're in a body and you're having an experience. And that experience isn't neutral. There's something that it feels like to be you right here, right now, in your own body. And so take a moment just simply to be present and aware to that reality and all the different details that arise with that. You might notice sensations in your feet, along your legs, on your backside. You might feel the clothes on your body. You might notice any tension or restriction in your shoulders, chest. Notice any sensation around your head and down your arms and in your fingers. And just see if you can bring into conscious awareness the entirety of your body as a whole. And as you do that, you might notice that there's some internal commentary often as we start to notice our body. And you might notice just the general tone of that commentary. You don't have to get lost in the content of the commentary. Just take a moment to appreciate the tone of the commentary and how it often directs you to experiencing certain parts of your body and excluding other parts. Now you can let just all of that go and just let your attention fall where it will. And now I want to direct you to your breathing. And as I direct you to your breathing, there can be a tendency to immediately want to change your breathing. And so I just want to let you know that that's not necessary. Just simply attend to your breathing. Be with your breath without changing your breath. Let it tell you something about your internal state this morning, in this moment. And as you notice your breathing, you can start by noticing your breathing rate. Are you breathing fast or are you breathing slow? And again, you're just noticing. You can also notice breathing volume. Are you taking small breaths or are you taking large breaths? Just noticing. And last, I want you to notice if you're attaching any unnecessary effort or tension to your breathing. So when you look at breathing rate and breathing volume, is there any unnecessary doing? Are you trying to do the breathing? And if you are, let go of that. Let the breath breathe itself. So noticing any effort or tension and just simply putting the intention to let go of that. Your body knows how to breathe. You just need to get out of the way. I'll give you 1 minute here where I won't talk, and then we'll wrap up. So for the next minute, I just want you to be with your breath, be with your body. If you notice any tension or effort arising, simply let it go. In a moment, I'm going to count to 3, and then you're going to take a very long, very slow inhale through your nose. And you're going to keep going until you fill up all the way, till you can't get more air in. You don't want to be too tense at the top there. So just as you start to notice tension, you want to stop there. I will count to 10. You will hold your breath. And then you will very, 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 very slowly exhale through your mouth, like you're blowing on a candle flame, but you're blowing so gently that you don't blow the flame out. So 1, 2, 3, slowly breathe in through the nose and just keep going until you hit that tension point where you can't get air in. Don't force it. And then once you're there, hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Very, very slowly exhale through the mouth. As you exhale, consciously let go of any tension in your body. Just allow gravity to hang on your shoulders, on your body as a whole. And then we're going to do it one more time. And on this last time, as you breathe in, you're going to imagine breathing in a quality that you want more of. And then when we hold, you're going to imagine that quality just trickling in and percolating into your whole being. And then on the exhale, you're going to imagine just letting go of anything that's unnecessary, anything that detracts from that quality. So 1, 2, 3, slowly breathe in and breathe in that quality. Allow it to fill you. Keep filling up. And then when you're full with that quality, just hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Slowly exhale through your mouth, letting go of anything that's unnecessary. Anything that pulls you away from being in this moment and being alive with that particular quality that you chose. You can start to wiggle your toes. If your hands are still up on your chest and stomach, you can put them down. You can start to wiggle your fingers, make a fist with your hands, open them up. Feel free to stretch your neck and head side to side. Roll your shoulders, anything that feels gentle and restorative. And before we transition out of this, I want you to go back to that scale of 1 to 10. And I want you to give yourself a new score. I want you to see if something about your internal experience, your internal state has shifted. And often when I do this with students, they come in a bit elevated. And after an exercise like this, they find themselves closer to that middle where we want to be, where there's that balance of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, where alertness and calm, like a teeter-totter, they're level. And that puts us into the best internal state where we can deal with reality most skillfully, where we have access to the better parts of our nature. We have access to the ability to learn, entertain perspective, remember what we value in the face of stress, so on and so forth. And if you did notice a shift in your internal state, appreciate the fact that you shifted your state, that you have that ability, you have that power through stillness, through quiet, through mindful attention, and through the regulation of breathing, your most powerful tool. You have the ability to shift your internal state. As I say to colleagues and students all the time, this is so important to recognize because we live in a culture that has normalized the outside-in regulation of internal states, where we import things like sedatives, like stimulants to regulate our internal state. And over time, this doesn't help us manage stress. This doesn't help us develop skill in the face of stress. So we want to develop and we want to help students develop these inside out strategies like breathing, like mindful attention, so that moving forward, the next time we face stress, we have more skill, more intelligence, more awareness, rather than less. Okay, I'll stop there. Let's transition in. If you could grab something to write with, or if you feel you feel confident that you can kind of go over things in your mind and remember them, that's great. But you might want to grab a pen or a pencil or something. I personally recommend paper and a writing utensil because we think differently and we attend differently to ideas when we're writing by hand than when we're on a computer. When we're on a computer, our mind is being triggered into that scatter attention mode. So if you can get something, I'll give you a moment. I'm already, as I have a tendency to do, as Tracy knows, I get in the moment of teaching and doing things and time just starts evaporating. So I was going to do some more introduction, just talk about my work at Lake Forest High School. I'm throwing that out so that we can get down to what's really important. I want to ask you three things right now, and I want you to think about them. The first is, why are you here? And I don't mean that necessarily in the universal existential sense, though if that's where you want to go with this, feel free to do that. But I mean more specifically, why are you here right now on this, at this conference in general, but more specifically at this particular session? So that's number one. Why are you here? Number two, I'm just going to give you all three and then let you have a couple minutes to reflect on these and compose a meaningful response. Number two is, what have you noticed in your respective educational spaces about the state and quality of attention? What have you noticed in your particular educational spaces about the state and quality of attention? So that's two. The third is, what have you noticed in your respective educational spaces about stress levels and the behaviors that they drive? What have you noticed about stress levels and the behaviors that they drive? So we've got three questions. Why are you here? What have you noticed about the state and quality of attention? And what have you noticed about stress levels and the behaviors that they drive? So I'll give you a couple minutes. We got to move fairly swiftly, so I'll do my best to balance authentic time to think and also moving forward. So we'll say 2-3 minutes. Thank you, Tracy. Tracy just put the questions in the chat if you didn't see that. About another minute. And sorry if I'm rushing you. I just want to make sure that we have enough time to process together. Okay. Tracy, if you could create groups, we're going to move into small groups. And in those groups, I always find that educators are starved for time to talk and process with other educators. Something we really don't get enough time to do. And so we're going to get into small groups, and you're just going to share what you've noticed and your different responses to those prompts. Then we'll come back as a whole group and process together as a whole. So Tracy, I'll let you. I'm going to go on a little rant. I promise I won't get lost. I promise. Somewhere along the way, education in its box checking decided that professional development was something that needed to happen to educators, that they somehow weren't capable of meaningfully collaborating and being given the time to do exactly what we just did so that they could figure out the path forward in the way that makes the most sense for their respective roles, places, the nuances of their circumstances, etc. And I'm not saying we don't need to import professional development. Yes, we do at times. We need to be pushed out of our boxes. We do get too comfortable in our little boxes sometimes, but we are not given nearly enough time to lean on each other and just share and be understood by each other and realize we're not alone. Because, you know, we all know this, that in the trenches of day-to-day work, where we're just putting out fires constantly, it can start to feel really lonely and isolating. So I just think this is an awesome opportunity for us to just be heard and to share, if it's only for 10 minutes. And I want to apologize to my group. I didn't see the thing. I'm just like mid-sentence going. And then all of a sudden I'm back in the main room. So I apologize. So I'll stop my rant there. I forgot to mention, when you went into your groups, have one person be able to report back. So we'll just do that kind of informally. Someone please share what your group discussed, if you're comfortable doing so on the fly. I'll start just to get it going. How about that? So we don't waste time. We realized very quickly that we could do this for a week-long retreat just to identify all the different things that are going on. So observation number one, a lot is going on. There's a lot to deal with, and that we are often without resources or enough resources to adequately deal with it. We have, oh my gosh, so much. Bringing in new faculty into a culture that doesn't exist anymore because we've been away. We've got trying to reboot, reset, and renew. We've got a lot of teachers understandably trying to restore a sense of normalcy so that they can feel comfortable with the stress, but often this attempt to hold on to a new sense of normalcy dysregulates kids, right? I see this in my day job all the time, is that teachers, one of the ways I work at the high school level, and one of the ways teachers attempt to deal with stress is to focus on what they can control. So calendar, content, curriculum, and that puts kids secondary. And so then you get things. I was sharing with my group last week, a biology teacher who was causing waves. All these kids were going down to social workers because they were giving a 100-question multiple choice pre-exam for a grade to students to do at home. And when I met with the teacher, they just said, hey, we got to stop babying these kids. They need to be more resilient. We need to get back to normal. We need to move forward. And as I'm listening, I'm hearing that this is the teacher's way of making sense of stress. And this is how they restore their own sense of agency, but it's at the expense of their students. And I'll stop here in a second. I keep hearing teachers say students need to become more resilient, which the subtext of that is often, I don't know how to change as a teacher because it makes me too anxious. And I'm going to hold to the things that I know I have control over. And when I say the students need to be more resilient, what I really mean is that they need to meet me where I'm at because I'm not comfortable changing, right? And so you get all sorts of issues with that. My group members, anything else I'm missing? I know I'm missing a ton, but thumbs up, okay.
Athia's sharing in the chat that she interviewed 2 of her former middle school students yesterday, and they said too much pressure right now. They want teachers focusing on their effort, not mastery all the time. Too much focus on mastering things in all this chaos.
Yeah.
So I'll chime in a little bit. Our group absolutely agreed about the decrease in the level of attention. And I always say, like, I want my kids to build stamina for being bored. I always want that for them. And I tell them that, like, when I give them wait time or pause time, I'm like, this is a powerful time. You're building stamina to be bored and to just be, which they have a lot of, challenge with. And these behaviors are signs. And I think it's not only students, it's us, right? We're like at this survival mode a little bit. And I'm very open with my students. And when I'm feeling a certain way, I really try to name it and bring attention to it and kind of model how I shift myself or how I work through it so that they can see an active engagement and real life application and hopefully take more ownership of that they can then transfer to other areas of their day. Even if it takes time out, nobody on my school is on this Zoom, takes times out from my instruction, because in the long run, it's going to pay off. And they're going to be able to have a chance to regulate, to be more productive and more attentive in the end, if I do that. So yes, I have to get through a certain amount of stuff, but at the same time, reading my kids as they come to me, understanding, I'm seeing their shoulders high, I'm seeing them walk a certain way, and kind of checking in with them when they come into me. I always ground them first. And at the end, allowing them to leave on a positive note, sharing something that worked for them that day. Like, and even like Matt with our breathing, just noticing their breath at the end of our time together. It's usually very different from our grounding experience in the beginning of our group, a half hour later at the end. And I really ask them to notice that change. Sometimes it goes up because they're excited for accomplishing something, but in general, they've come down to a more regulated state. So just, and I continue on this journey with those kids. It is not the same day, every day, but I am finding when I ground myself too before the group, it's a win all the way around. So anyway.
That was amazing. And to that end, when we talk about social emotional learning, the progression of those 3 words is significant. We learn emotions in social contexts. Specifically, the people of influence in any given situation establish the emotional climate and tone. So the social context, the coach, the teacher, the parent, their emotional skill and intelligence is ultimately teaching how to embody emotion for students, athletes, etc. And so if we want learning, we have to think about how the social context of any given situation creates an emotional experience that may or may not support learning, right? So it's the sequence of those words is deliberate. It's giving us the progression of the work. And as you were talking, I think I was hearing that, I was seeing that you were saying you were modeling and making transparent how to be with emotions. That's how emotions are taught. They're not taught on worksheets. They're not taught through all these other things. They're taught by adults in real time in stressful situations, showing their process. They're opening up their inner workings and saying, hey, this is how I'm moving through this and making sense of it. It's so invaluable, so important. Another group.
In the reading realm, as a reading specialist, we always do what we call think alouds. So I kind of try to think of that as I model for the kids so that they can understand my thinking a little bit or try to grasp onto that a little bit.
Good.
And Matt, just so you know, we have 29 minutes.
29 minutes. I just have an hourglass, an image of just the sand.
Yeah.
Dropping through. Any other brave groups willing to share? Sharing is caring.
I would, hi Matt, I would just say teaching, also teaching high school, that, probably half of my students, well, the ones that are there, because, so many are out now, but the ones that are there, there's just, that little device is just so compelling that it's just, I don't know, really, it's just, is it addiction or they're just, they're uninterested in learning. But it is just really, really hard. We can't take a phone away. We just, so yeah, just how to connect, between the device and the AirPods. It's like, who is actually here in this room, and it is February.
Laura, I walk into classrooms now and not a single student is talking. They're all on their phones. And phones have become a way of, again, outside in regulation,
Mhm.
Phones have become the primary regulator. It's the go-to. And what's so insidious about that is it makes it, what they really need is connection.
Mhm.
And nothing annihilates connection like a phone out.
Right.
And so it's just compounding the problem. It's further isolating them and making adults feel further isolated from the students. Yeah.
And if you ask the students, oh, sorry, if you ask the students why they do that or where they learn that from their parents, from other adults too. I'm not saying that it's not on them, but it's partly because of us as well.
I was gonna say, sorry, I'm not a large group speaker kind of person, so I apologize in advance. So one of the things I was gonna say is like, as far as the technology, it's kind of like, so one of the things is education. It's like, if we see this connection with our kids are coming in the form of technology, then I think we kind of have to be uncomfortable to meet them where they are. If we're saying, hey, meet us, tell us what you want us to do in order to help you grow and develop, then we have to meet them. Because I have a freshman in high school who has ADHD. And so yesterday they didn't have school because the weather was really bad here in Houston. And so she was like, hey, we're doing like cell division and stuff. So she legit made a TikTok video about how cell division happens, right? This helps her. So we can use technology and connect with our kids via technology, but we have to be willing to do that. And so saying, no, it has to be pencil paper, because we're looking at the different learning modalities of these kids. And so in order to like get on their page and to slow that microwave down, say, hey, show me how to do this so I can get better at this, so I can connect with you. Once you connect with them on that level, you can take them out and bring them into the real world. I'm a firm believer of that. And okay, that's it. I'm done. Okay.
Well said. Well said. I think if we all could inhabit the experience of a student, it has to be so bizarre, because I think most of us, when we were in the educational system, the world we were living in and the world inside the school were more consistent. And now these kids are living in this world of information and stimulation and engagement and creativity and all the things that happen with devices. And then they walk into a school, and it to them, it has to be like you're stepping into virtual time travel to a century ago. And we're all used to that and wondering why they're not totally interested in what we're saying. So we definitely need to start meeting them more where they're at. I'll say, while someone's building up the courage to talk again, I was on Athia's podcast. Is Athia still on here? I don't see Athia. Athia, are you still here? Athia has a podcast, and she asked me the question, what's the biggest obstacle to young adults' mental and emotional well-being? And I said, adults. And I think that's a thread that comes up in doing this work in my own district and everywhere, is that we have a tendency to think about children's and young adults' struggles as being something separate from our own. That somehow they're in a world that's been isolated from ours, and they're struggling in this world, but we don't realize that we created the world that they're struggling in, and that their habits and behaviors are acquired and learned and practiced through us and through their interactions with us. Which is why I really think that if in your own school district or building or space, I think where you get the most return on investment in terms of mindfulness and social emotional learning is building adult capacity. That's where you're going to get all the return on investment, because if adults in that space are self-aware and self-regulating, the research shows that will ripple into everything else. You can have all these programs, best practices, lesson plans, you name it. Your school district can put down tens of thousands of dollars and import all of this stuff. And if the adults who are leading all these activities and doing these things lack self-awareness and self-regulation, none of it's going to matter. And that's really, I think, a critical piece.
Matt, do you think that that is more inhibitive from a higher level of administration? That once, and the only reason I'm saying that is I feel like there's a lot of teachers out there that really want to do this work and really want to be there for their kids and be mindful with their kids. But when you get to that administrative level, as they've been more and more removed from the classroom, that's what's not allowing. Those are the adults that are, so it's a smaller group to me of adults that are that interference, that's providing that interference. So I guess I feel, I know what you're saying, but it's more like the adults with more of the power than the adults that are in the trenches.
Yeah. No doubt that the rhetoric around students first is one that is reinforced and makes leaders seem like they're doing their job when they talk about students first and all of that. But if we want students first, ironically, we have to make adults first, because in most, yeah.
And if there's an administrator on this panel, I thank you for being here and hearing these things. I guess that's one part of the reason that I'm here today, as with this entire conference, is I keep trying to bring these messages to my district, and there's a lot of resistance, And I'm not fighting the kids. I'm fighting, and even if I have one administrator that's on my side, or it trying to promote me and elevate me within the district, is, oh, it's not a good time. This isn't, there's always something stopping. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
I'm in the same position often, and my interpretation is that the lifespan of an educational leader in a particular building has gotten so small that if they're going to continue on that trajectory, they have to check boxes and demonstrate their value. And it's easier to do that focusing on student-centered programming, because for most schools, the enduring culture is composed by the adults in the building. Students come and go, leaders come and go, parents come and go. But in most places, teachers are the enduring culture, which means if you're going to change things, you have to start with teachers, but that takes time, because there's already a leader comes in and there's already a teacher culture in place for the last 15 years, 10 years, 20 years, right? Yeah. And so to change that for the leader isn't worth their time. So they have to look at the teacher as a means to the end of student improvement, achievement, learning, etc. And it's just a broken model. It's just broken. Yeah. And what you need is a brave educator. I'm sorry, a brave administrator who's willing to invest in the bigger picture that will bear fruits long after they're gone. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm ranting again. Okay. Someone else talk. I'm muting myself.
Sherry had a question.
Oh, thank you. Well, sort of.
Oop, we can't hear you all of a sudden. You cut out.
She froze. It must be cold there.
Oh, Sherry, we can't hear you. I'm sorry, Sherry, your internet must be We see you, but we can't hear you. Try turning off your video. Sometimes that helps.
I'm sorry, Zoom hates Chromebooks. So I'll ask my question in the chat. The sound keeps fading in and out. It's the Chromebook I'm on,
Okay.
sadly.
We
But
can hear you.
hopefully-
We can
Oh,
hear
you
you
could?
right now. Why don't you give it a try?
Okay, 3 young ladies were arrested at my school yesterday, and because we haven't had any, like, let's say, moderate consequences, or we haven't done any SEL work. You know, we've been going through the motions, like some of the things that you mentioned. And so instead, you know, it makes you think of the prison to school to prison pipeline. And so instead of working with kids to help them heal, their first experience is straight to a negative experience with law enforcement. And so it's been hitting ahead. And yesterday meant a lot to me, hearing some of the language about institutions that checking off the boxes, not wanting to have the brave discussions, you know, and we say students and student success a lot in our district, as if the adults, like Matt just mentioned. And so thank you for the language to go back and say to them, you know, what maybe an administrator can understand, that if we don't take the time to do this work really, like, and we do it mindless, how are we going to be able to help students? You know, so thank you again. This has been, you know, great, because they look at teachers as a bunch of complainers instead of
Oop, you cut out again. You cut out again. I want to mention quickly that I love how this session is going with the conversational nature. Matt will for sure lead another PD for us to be learning about specific ways. But I do want to point to his chapter in our Educating Mindfully book called Why Wellbeing, Teacher Identity, and Mindfulness Matter. And it goes more into his role at his school and the PD that he helped design. So definitely we've had a lot of sessions with Matt in the past. Go to our learning center and you'll find those for more time with Matt. But yeah, we've got 15 minutes, Matt. How do you want our rest of our time to? You're
a good moderator, because you're just setting up this segue.
Good. Yay.
So the next step is, as I have a tendency of doing, mismanaging time in every day. My students are like, we're 5 minutes over. How do you mess up time every day? I was going to put us back into groups, but we don't have enough time to do that. It's important. It's so important to have these conversations that we've been having. And this is obviously not nearly enough time or really the appropriate format to go super deep, but it's always important to start with articulating what we perceive to be the problem and attempting a more complete analysis of what's creating it. And this is a piece where we're all, not just in education, we live in a world where we get stuck in problem-solving mode, which only perpetuates our problems, because we never step back and give ourselves the opportunity to more completely and in-depth analyze what's happening. We're just throwing stuff at the problems as they pop up. And in the long term, this becomes an orientation to education as an institution, and it's not healthy. So it's really important to continue doing what we are doing now, but I don't want all of you to leave this session like, yeah, I got to talk about all the things that are the problems. Let's take the last 10 or so minutes, and what are you doing in your district that's working? Or what are you doing in your own classroom that you know works? And I think that level of analysis is often overlooked, but might be the most vital is the individual in their particular educational space. What are they doing that seems to work? Because that can be what saves a kid. That can be what turns one class around and puts them on a different trajectory, emotionally, academically, et cetera. So do any of you have practices? I'm happy to share what I've been doing that seems to work, but I'm also interested in hearing what
Matt, I would like to share one thing that I've done and implemented last year. I'm Chloe. I'm a restorative community school manager in Oakland, California. And so part of my role is bringing together students, staff, partners, families, and working with the district. And so again, a lot of what I do, I lean in and I pay attention to what is being said and not said. So long story short, in COVID last year when we were all virtual, families are coming to me, teachers are coming to me. And so I also have the administrator's ears. And so what I share with her is that we need to take the time, exactly what you were saying, to lean into these adults who are then charged to take care of our students. So hence, I was in there building out PDs just with that intent. And it started with, let's be aware of self first. So we did a lot of work around, let's slow it down. So my rhetoric around that was, let's slow it down. So let's have a PD, but we're going to concentrate on self. Then we're going to look at our community as a school, and then our larger community around the school, right, which feeds into it. And so we did that starting last November, continued all the way last year, did it again when we came back in person. One of the best things that I heard, because I always have feedback from the teachers, and they're like, Miss Chloe, thank you so much, because this is the PD that we look forward to, because we have the time to pause. We have the time, exactly what you were saying, to get connected. Some teachers were there, some teachers are new, and I'm like, how do we get to know each other? So a lot of it was building out our own relationships and seeing who we are, so then we know how to lean on each other when we need the help, and then we can be there for our students and our families. But I had to really ask for it and get the time to slow it down, exactly what you were saying around the self-awareness, so we can be in charge of that, and then we can move from that point on.
That was amazing.
I kind of want to, oh, sorry, Matt.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I want to jump off of what Chloe was just saying. One thing that I've done a lot differently, especially since the pandemic helped me to see this, is I teach both high school and college English. So I always start every class and every week's announcements with, remember, you're a human first. If you're not taking care of yourself as a human, you're never going to be a student in my classroom, whether you're there or not. So that's why if you walk into my high school classroom every day, you're probably going to see a kid sleeping somewhere, or you're going to see one working on their math assignment. And as a teacher, I've realized my job is to teach them. And whether that's in English or whatever subject, or as a human, I'm still completing my job. So I really made sure to take a step back as a teacher and a larger step forward as a human to make sure they're building themselves in that capacity. With my college students, I had one last semester who kind of disappeared for a while. We were asynchronous, so they're not meeting at a normal time. It's all online. Turns out grandpa in Mexico had COVID, ended up getting very sick and passing away. And they go, I don't want to fail your class. And I said, I get it. I totally understand. So I worked and got them an extension. I think just being a human and building that empathy and saying, hey, let's do that first before we learn is where we need to go with this.
Beautiful. And so true. If anything we do that doesn't have that first step being that intent to connect on a human level, that really is the foundation. Just quickly going back to Chloe, what you were saying, I absolutely love that. And here's the challenge, is that when stress is on the scene, everything speeds up. So it gets increasingly, this is why stress is so insidious, because what we need to do in the midst of stress is slow down. But what stress does is accelerate everything. right? And that's because of, we don't need to get into what it's doing to our brain, but it changes the way we're actually perceiving the world. And so it's so important for educators, adults, like you were saying, to recognize that that is the case. That whenever there's stress, things will speed up and we'll start becoming more reactive. We'll start making hasty decisions, and it just compounds. And so knowing that that's our tendency and knowing that our job is inherently stressful, how do we then preventatively and proactively commit to taking the time to slow down and valuing that, because we know that's the anchor, so that we don't just spin out and go into a tailspin that never ends. That we might spin out for a day, but we come back to that anchor of stillness, recalibrate, or a week, or however the school can arrange it. But we can do these micro cycles even in our own classroom. Chad, what you were just saying, just starting every educational experience with an acknowledgement of our humanity, which often silence and stillness is such a wonderful space to develop that. And it might take work to get students to get comfortable with that stillness and silence because they've never had exposure to it. I get that all the time, where you're giving them something they so desperately need, but they don't know how to receive it. So you have to coach them to be okay with that. And once they get there, then that conduit is open and they feel it and they know it. I love that idea of slowing down. Thank you, Chloe.
We've had some great sharing in the chat box.
Let's hear it. I'm paying no attention.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it just brings to mind that with our professional membership and our COSM community, that mentorship being at the forefront, and that, like Ashley shared about which in the chat what she's doing in Georgia, and she was going to be a presenter, an in-person presenter, but so we're going to bring her to do a mentorship session later in the year. So just seeing these, we all have so much that we can be sharing and learning from each other, and just our short time together, it shows the power of connecting and learning from each other. So thank you, Matt, usually Matt has slides and he's just doling out like just this information that's so amazing. So I love that Matt chose to start off.
This is my first no slide presentation, and I am late to the party because this is 100 times better. I will say one thing real quickly, that if you want more of this, join the Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully, because that's the whole point.
Yeah, and they all are, like with conference registration, they get that full year. And again, we never kick anyone out after the year. It's all everyone's welcome here. Do you want to close out? We have 4 minutes. Just close us out with a little practice, maybe that you do with your students at the end of a class, or however you want to end.
I think I would like to end with just two things to remind yourself. One, what's the one thing personally and professionally that if you get it right, you succeeded? What's the one thing personally and professionally, if you get it right, you succeeded? This is so important, because what this does is help you in the midst of stress and the chaos of being an educator, in the midst of a pandemic and all of these things. Keep your eyes on the prize. But you can't do that if you don't know what that thing is, what actually will constitute success in the most basic sense, and continue to focus on that. The second thing is, what do you, and this kind of indirectly relates to the first, I guess it's another way of phrasing it. What do you not want to forget? Stress makes us forget. Distraction makes us forget. When we get stress, it annihilates our attention. And when our attention gets annihilated, we're dysregulated and scattered, and we forget. Literally, we forget things like our keys, our coffee, our lesson plan, like all this stuff. But I mean, in a deeper sense, we forget what's actually important. So another way of asking the question is what do you not want to forget? What do you always want to keep in the center of your heart when you start a day as a human being, but also when you walk into your respective educational space? What do you want in your heart? And I think just articulating that and always coming back to that, right? All your students are learning their emotions from you. So start your own practice on a daily basis. Wake up and say to yourself, what will make today a success? Personally and professionally. And if you get good at reminding yourself of that and creating the rituals in your day to remind you to bring your focus back to that, you're going to be a powerful human being. You're going to have a lot of influence in your classroom, in your social workspace, with colleagues, etc., because everyone's running around scattered and forgetting. I'll stop there. So thank you. You're all amazing. Hopefully we'll see at some point in person next year. Fingers crossed the next year we'll be doing this in person. If you have any questions for me, feel free. My website's mattdeward.com. Right on the front thing, you can put a message in and send it to me, and I get it directly. And happy to chat more or whatever. But thank you for taking time on your Saturday morning. I know you're all busy, and thank you for being here. I'm inspired by all of you, and I'm most inspired by Tracy Heilers, who's the most amazing human being, who's moderating this and is the whole reason why we're here. So give her a virtual pat on the back.
You all bring me so much joy. I'm happy to be helping connect everyone. So, all right, we'll see everybody in 15 minutes with Gina Harris's session.